After our 18th failed attempt at divorce, Mike suddenly stopped bringing it up altogether. It was a stark contrast to how things had been before. Every single attempt prior had ended in absolute chaos. I had slit my wrists, stood on the ledge of our high-rise, and plastered photos of him and his personal assistant all over the corporate lobby. At a press conference, I had publicly torn Isla's clothes off, leaving her with severe post-traumatic stress disorder. He should have loathed me. Yet the word divorce never crossed his lips again. He came home right on the dot every night, handed over his phone, and checked in every single hour. Even on business trips, we were on a round-the-clock video call. But the unease in my chest never faded. Day after day, I pestered him, demanding to know why he had given up on the divorce. He would only counter with a question. Am I not doing enough? It was good. Too good to be real. It wasn't until he caught me tailing him yet again that the exhaustion in his eyes spilled over, and he finally told me the truth. I got a phone call from myself. 10 years in the future, he whispered. He told me that if I divorced you, I'd regret it. I stood there, stunned. And you actually believed that? He said you set a fire and burned Isla alive. He looked up, his eyes harboring a dark, bottomless abyss of despair. You're too unhinged, Vivian. I can't take that risk. I can't afford to. We're staying together. This is our life now. That one sentence, this is our life now, pinned me to the floor like a pathetic clown. He hadn't said a word about wanting to leave, yet every syllable dripped with pure, unadulterated hatred. Those dead eyes were a blade driven straight through my ribs. It wasn't regret. It wasn't an awakening. It was sheer terror and begrudging defeat. But this miserable, drag-out existence? Suddenly, I was done playing my part in it. Seeing me frozen, he didn't try to soothe me as he once would have. He calmly slipped on his coat, masking his brief slip of composure, and systematically went through his schedule. I will arrive at the office at 2. The meeting starts at 3 and will run for 2 hours. He paused halfway to the door, turning back. By the way, I won't be able to answer any calls or video chats during that time. If you don't believe me, you can wait by the entrance. Each word was measured, cold, and distant. Before I could even process it, the car door slammed shut. I watched his car shrink into the distance, a perfect metaphor for the chasm widening between us. The tears finally spilled over. The day I caught Mike and Isla together, I lost my mind. I took to scrubbing his skin raw with disinfectant and scanning him with UV lights. If I found a single stray hair, I would hysterically demand DNA tests for everyone in the office. He pleaded, claiming they had been drugged, showing me security footage and blood reports. But my mind refused to accept his betrayal. Then came the day he first slid the divorce papers across the table. Vivian, I'll give you 80% of my assets. Let's just end this. I'm so exhausted. That night was the first time I climbed onto the roof ledge. He had dragged me back, wild with terror, screaming in absolute ruin. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Torture me, destroy me. Do whatever you want to me, just don't hurt yourself. I can't survive without you. But why? Why was the man who claimed he couldn't live without me now begging, time and time again, for me to let him go so he could be with Isla? The Seattle rain began to fall. I held an umbrella in my hand but forgot to open it. I suppose Mike had spoiled me over the last decade. I was so used to him driving me everywhere, holding the umbrella over my head, wiping my mouth at dinner. Even on crowded pedestrian streets, he had a way of pulling favors to park right at the storefronts I wanted to visit. And now it was all gone in an instant. It felt as if a physical chunk of my heart had been carved out, leaving a hollow space for the icy wind to whistle through. I couldn't even tell if the moisture on my face was rain or my own tears. Back at the house, a fever took hold of me. In my delirious haze, Mike was right there, wiping my burning skin with warm water, and checking my temperature every 15 minutes. When his assistant called to urge him to attend a meeting, he roared into the phone, telling them to go to hell. He was always this frantic whenever I fell ill. His hand wrapping mine was incredibly warm, yet my body wouldn't stop shaking. The phone kept ringing, and he refused to answer. But the noise was too loud, eventually dragging me back to consciousness. The room was cold and empty. There was no one beside me. It was my own phone buzzing on the nightstand. Mike was never there. I swallowed the metallic taste rising in my throat and answered. Mrs. Sinclair, Mr. Sinclair didn't show up at the office today, my private investigator reported. I froze. He returned briefly, then headed straight to Oakwood Sanctuary. He's been inside for over 2 hours now. A wave of nausea hit me. Oakwood Sanctuary was the private care facility where Isla was staying. Mike's parting words echoed in my ears. If you don't believe me, wait by the entrance. How could he be so sure I wouldn't show up? He said those words every single time he gave me his schedule. I had never believed him before, always choosing to wait. This was the one time I chose to trust him, and I was wrong again. I checked the time. 6 in the evening. Usually, he was home by 5:30. Since he wasn't coming back, I would go to him. In the past, every time I cornered him, he would shove the divorce papers in my face. This time, I had already signed them. Before I could even reach Isla's room, a dozen bodyguards swarmed me, instantly on high alert. Mrs. Sinclair, Mr. Sinclair gave strict orders. You are not allowed near Miss Isla. Through the human wall, I caught sight of the door. A sticker of Mike and Isla, styled as cartoon puppies, was framed inside a pink heart. Below it, in playful font, were the words, Gav and Isla's hideaway. I forced a cold, empty laugh. Childish. I had once begged Mike to take those silly photo booth pictures with me. He had always dismissed it, saying a corporate CEO couldn't indulge in such nonsense. It turned out he could, he just couldn't do it with me. Clutching my aching chest, I took a deep breath. Get out of my way. You know what I'm capable of when I lose my mind. With that, I pulled a small utility knife from my bag. I only meant to scare them. But in the next second, a bodyguard lunged forward, slamming me onto the hard floor. The others pinned my limbs down, trapping me completely. Apologies, ma'am, but Mr. Sinclair was very clear. At the first sign of an episode, we are to contain you immediately. Another guard spoke rapidly into his radio. Sir, your wife is here. She has a knife. Before he could finish, Mike's frantic voice cut through the static, sharp and panicked. Then pin her down. Do it now. What if she hurts Isla? My struggles ceased instantly. She is contained. Should we transport her back to the estate or lock her up here? The radio went quiet for 2 agonizing seconds. Finally, a heavy sigh crackled through. Forget it. Bring her in. The knife had been wrestled from my grip, but in the scuffle, the blade had sliced my wrist. As they escorted me into the room, blood dripped onto the floor. I bit my lower lip, fighting back the tears. But the moment the door swung open, I froze. The evening sun filtered through sheer curtains, bathing a rocking chair on the balcony in warmth. Beside it stood a small side table holding a cup of steaming coffee and an open book. In the corner, a vintage record player spun a soft jazz record, Mike's favorite. This wasn't a sterile hospital room, it was a home. Specifically, it was the exact home I had designed. Before our wedding, I had hand-drawn every detail, blending our tastes perfectly. But Mike had told me he didn't want me stressing over construction, hiring a design firm instead to build our mansion in an entirely different style. Now, the dream home I had envisioned stood right before me, serving as a sanctuary for him and another woman. You're here. Mike's voice drifted from behind me. I turned, my face pale. Before I could mask my shock, he spoke again. Isla always loved this design, so I had it recreated for her. You don't mind, do you? I stared at him in disbelief. What do you think, Mike? He nodded slowly. Then tear it apart, Vivian. If it makes you happy, destroy it. He looked at my bleeding wrist, showing nothing but a flicker of disgust. I'm used to your theatrics, and so is Isla. He looked toward the window, his tone so calm it was as if he were merely remarking on the weather. Look, Vivian, a rainbow. I followed his gaze. The rain had cleared, leaving a beautiful arch across the sky. But the storm raging inside me felt like it would never end. Gav, sweetie, come play It Takes Two with me. Isla's voice abruptly cut off as she noticed me. The controller slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the floor. She grabbed her head, screaming hysterically. No, don't strip me. Don't kill my baby. I'm a home wrecker. I'm a mistress. I'm sorry, please. I won't do it again. Mike rushed over, pulling her tightly into his arms. His eyes welled with protective rage. Sure, it's okay. Don't be afraid. I'm right here. No one will ever hurt you again. As he muttered those soothing words, his eyes locked onto mine, burning with unmasked hatred. A laugh bubbled up from my throat, dry and hollow, until tears streamed down my face. For a split second, I wanted to lunge forward, drag Isla to the balcony, and throw us both over the edge. But my remaining sanity whispered that they weren't worth my life. I dug my fingernails into my palms, fighting the urge to drag her down with me. I sneered, cut the act, Isla. She flinched, burying her face deeper into Mike's chest. I don't know what you mean. I let out a harsh laugh. PTSD doesn't look like that. Mike rose, stepping in front of her like a shield. Enough. If you want to lash out, do it to me. Stop acting like you know everything, and don't you dare slander her. But I did know. I had lived with the disease for over a decade, ever since the day I watched my mother die. Whenever the memory of her blood pooling on the pavement flashed in my mind, I would spiral into vomiting, sobbing, and self-harm. I had never told a soul that my mother took her own life, because my father had loved someone else. I had sworn I would never step into the trap of marriage. Yet Mike had staked his entire corporate future, and the rest of his life to promise me he would never betray me. I believed I wouldn't end up like my mother. But in the end, I was walking the exact same path. The screaming, the madness, the self-destruction. I was done with it. I reached into my bag to retrieve the signed divorce papers. Mike's expression morphed into pure terror. What are you doing? Grab her. Before my hand could leave my bag, the guard slammed me back onto the cold marble floor. Mike marched over and kicked my bag away, the force of the blow vibrating through my hands. As long as I draw breath, you will never lay a finger on her. I stared up at his face, a messy mix of terror and fury. I recalled a night when he slipped out of bed while I pretended to sleep. Suspecting he was sneaking off to see Isla, I crept after him, only to overhear him asking the receiver if the Vivian of 10 years later would still be this unhinged, and if keeping himself alive was the only way to shield Isla. I hadn't understood those hushed words then. Now it all clicked. That was the mysterious call from his future self. He was utterly terrified of me. No matter what I did, he would assume it was a plot to harm Isla. My cheek pressed against the freezing marble, as cold and dead as my heart. I let out a soft, tired laugh. The papers are in my bag, Mike. I already signed them. Mike eyed me suspiciously before rummaging through my bag. He pulled out the documents, glanced at my signature, and immediately tore them into shreds. I told you. I am not divorcing you. I looked at him calmly. Just because of that phone call? Isla tugged gently at his jacket sleeve. What phone call, Gav? It's nothing, he muttered. But you promised to give me a home, she whimpered. Mike's fists clenched, his face flushing crimson. Don't ask questions. Just know I'm doing this for your own good. Isla's eyes welled with tears. Gently wiping them away, he whispered. I will give you everything, Isla. Everything but the title of my wife. Those words were meant for me, too. He would give her everything, while keeping me locked in a gilded cage of a hollow marriage. It was all so incredibly pathetic. Just sign the papers, Mike. I'm not going to burn her alive, I said quietly. That phone call? I hired someone to make it with a voice modulator. Mike went rigid, his eyes widening in pure shock. You're lying. Of course it's a lie, I muttered, turning my head away. I was terrified you'd actually leave me, so I fabricated the whole thing. He hesitated, his brow furrowing. But the caller knew everything about my childhood. Things only I would know. I scoffed softly. I've known you for a decade, Mike. I know your secrets. I knew exactly how to play you. Silence descended upon the room. He stared at me, his gaze intense and searching, trying to decipher my mind. I pressed my forehead against the cold floor, hiding the tremor in my lips. It was the first lie I had ever told him since the day we met. Perhaps there really had been a call from the future. Perhaps he truly would regret everything 10 years down the line. But I didn't care anymore. I was too tired. I took a deep breath, raised my head, and masked my features with a look of pure indifference. Well, are we signing or not? This is your one and only chance. Slap. Mike's palm struck my cheek, leaving a stinging heat in its wake. You can play your hysterical games all you want, but this crosses the line, he snarled. You are completely out of your mind, Vivian. He waved his assistant over. Print a new set of divorce papers. Now. I thought my heart had gone numb. But the empty space in my chest still throbbed with a cold, sharp ache. The papers were brought in minutes later. He scrawled his name across the bottom and flung the sheets at my face. You'll get half the estate. I won't pinch a single penny. But remember this, Vivian. I never want to see your face again. At his command, the guards finally released me. I scrambled up from the floor, gathered the sheets of paper, and walked out without looking back. On the drive back, the skies opened up. The pouring rain soaked me to the bone. Yet my mind had never felt clearer. Suddenly, my phone vibrated. It was an unknown number. Vivian, listen to me. A voice rasped. It sounded exactly like mine but older, tired. I am you 10 years from now. You must divorce Mike. But please don't do anything stupid. Don't hurt yourself, and whatever you do, don't start a fire. If you do, he will make your life a living hell forever. I remained quiet for a moment. It's done, I whispered. I've signed the papers. And I won't hurt myself. The voice on the other end let out a long, ragged sigh of relief. Thank God. Go live your life, Vivian. Be happy. The line went dead. I stared at the screen and nodded. 2 phone calls from 10 years in the future, warning of 2 entirely different fates. I had no desire to unravel the mystery of which was real. I was simply done living in fear. Back at the estate, I packed light. A few casual clothes, my passport, and some essential documents. That was all I had to show for a decade of marriage. The painted portrait of the 2 of us on the nightstand stood out like an eyesore. Mike had always claimed he hated cameras, which was why we didn't have a single wedding photo. Yet in Isla's sanctuary, every corner was decorated with snapshots of them. Surfing on sunny beaches, enjoying the snow under a winter sunset. They had explored the world together, while I was trapped in this dark house. In that portrait, we looked like 2 fictional characters, standing side by side but entirely detached. I shattered the glass frame, tore the canvas right down the middle, and claimed only my half. At the airport, my phone began to buzz. Mike's name flashed on the screen. I declined it. He called again. I declined it again. Then the messages started flooding in. I never told you how I got the scar on the bottom of my foot. That phone call was real, wasn't it? You lied to me. You've never lied to me before. Vivian, where the hell are you? I powered down my phone and buckled my seatbelt. An hour ago, I had made a call to my father. Right now, his private jet was carrying me far away, heading toward a city where the sun never stopped shining. The flight from Seattle to Sydney was 14 hours of absolute, uninterrupted silence. As my father's private jet climbed above the heavy, bruised clouds of the Pacific Northwest, the rhythmic hum of the engine slowly replaced the chaotic static that had filled my head for 10 years. I sat in the wide leather seat, staring at the half-torn canvas of our portrait resting on the table before me. In the cutaway half, Mike's shoulder was visible, but his face was gone left behind in the shattered frame on a nightstand in a house I would never see again. I didn't feel the urge to scream. I didn't feel the hot, choking bile of panic rising in my throat. I just felt empty, a clean, hollow vessel that had finally been drained of its poison. When the jet landed in Sydney, the sky was a brilliant, blinding blue. The sun was hot, baking the asphalt of the tarmac, a stark, gorgeous contrast to the gray drizzle that had defined my marriage. My father was waiting for me at the private terminal. He didn't ask questions. He didn't look at my bandaged wrist or the hollow, dark circles under my eyes. He simply walked over, wrapped his arms around me, and held me tightly against his shoulder. "Welcome home, Vivian," he whispered. "Let's get you settled." My father was a man of immense wealth, and even greater silence. He had never liked Mike, but he had stayed quiet during our 10-year marriage because he knew my mother's history. He had been terrified that if he pushed me too hard, I would slip over the edge just as she had. He had let me live in that toxic Seattle mansion, waiting for the day I would finally choose to save myself. That day had finally come. He bought me a small, private villa overlooking the cliffs of Vaucluse. The house was designed with minimalist concrete, wide glass windows, and a massive outdoor deck that looked straight out over the endless, turquoise sprawl of the Pacific Ocean. There were no hidden corners, no sterile hospital-like structures, and no locked basements. Everything was open to the light. For the first 6 months, I did nothing but sleep and paint. I hired a private therapist who specialized in complex trauma and domestic gaslighting. During our weekly sessions on the sunny deck, I didn't cry. I simply described the 10 years of my life as if I were reading a medical chart of a stranger. "You weren't unhinged because you were born sick, Vivian," Dr. Harris said to me one afternoon, tapping his pen against his chin. "You were unhinged because you were living in a house where the walls were constantly moving, and the person you trusted most was the one pushing them." I looked out at the ocean, watching the white sails of a distant yacht catching the afternoon wind. "I thought I was my mother," I said softly. "Your mother didn't have a choice," Dr. Harris replied. "You did. And you chose to walk out." While my soul was slowly healing under the Australian sun, the paradise Mike had built for himself in Seattle was beginning to rot. I had systematically ignored every single attempt at contact. I had blocked his assistants, his lawyers, and his private security team. But my father's investigators kept a quiet, steady eye on the Sinclair Group's corporate filings and on the private sanctuary at Oakwood. 2 months after the divorce, Mike and Isla had officially gone public. Without the insane, violent wife blocking their way, they were free to live their love story out in the open. They attended corporate galas together, dined at the city's finest restaurants, and Isla officially moved out of the care facility and into the massive Seattle estate I had left behind. But the reality of their freedom was a silent, suffocating nightmare. For 10 years, Mike's entire identity had been defined by my theatrics. He had built a system where he was the long-suffering, heroic husband, protecting his delicate mistress from his mad wife. His guilt, his resentment, and his passion were all fueled by the constant, high-stakes drama of my hysteria. Once the monster was gone, the stage was empty. Without my screaming, the silence in the Seattle mansion was deafening. Mike found himself walking into the guest rooms, staring at the empty closets, waiting for me to jump out and demand a DNA test on his shirts. He kept his phone on his desk, checking it every 5 minutes, waiting for the frantic, hysterically angry calls that never came. And then the illusion of Isla's sweetness began to unravel. Isla was a woman who had thrived on being the forbidden fruit. She had loved the secret photo booth pictures, the hidden sanctuary, and the quiet, breathless late-night visits where Mike would hold her and promise her the world. She had played the delicate victim of PTSD because it made Mike feel protective, powerful, and heroic. But once she became the official lady of the Sinclair estate, the victim act was no longer useful. She began to demand the corporate titles I had held. She wanted her name on the board of directors. She demanded that Mike remodel the entire estate, which was built in her favorite style, because she was suddenly bored of the design. The delicate, fragile girl who couldn't handle a loud noise was suddenly screaming at the maids, throwing expensive porcelain at the walls, and hysterically demanding that Mike cut off all ties with his corporate partners, who who had been close to my father. She's not Vivian, Mike's private investigator had whispered to his assistant. During a corporate meeting, a report that my father's team intercepted. But she's starting to sound just like her. Only, there's no love in it. Just greed. Worse, without my father's massive capital backing the Sinclair Group's international shipping lines, Mike's company was beginning to struggle. The banks, realizing that the Vance family had entirely withdrawn their guarantees, began to tighten their credit lines. Mike was forced to work 18-hour days, not to hide from a crazy wife, but to keep his empire from collapsing. And when he returned home, exhausted and bleeding from corporate cuts, he wasn't met with warm water or a frantic, loving check of his temperature. He was met with Isla, holding a stack of credit card bills, screaming at him for not spending enough time with her. By the 8th month, Mike's desperation had reached a breaking point. He had finally discovered the truth of the future phone calls. He had hired a highly specialized forensic digital team to trace the call his future self had made to him 10 years ago. It took them months of navigating encrypted servers, foreign satellite relays, and obsolete telecommunication networks, but they finally traced the origin point. The call hadn't been made from a voice modulator in Seattle. It had been placed from an encrypted satellite phone registered to a private yacht docked in the Mediterranean. A phone that had been purchased using a shell company owned by Isla. The revelation was a physical blow that left Mike paralyzed at his desk for hours. The call from his future self, warning him that Vivian would burn Isla alive, had been a meticulously planned, high-tech hoax. Isla had hired a professional voice actor who specialized in vocal deepfakes, feeding him details of Mike's childhood secrets she had systematically extracted from Mike during their quiet, late-night pillow talks over the years. She had fabricated the entire thing to ensure Mike would never divorce Vivian. Because she knew that if Mike divorced Vivian, my father would immediately withdraw his billions, and the Sinclair Group would be ruined. She had wanted Mike to remain in a hollow, miserable marriage with me so she could continue to enjoy the luxury of his wealth while playing the tragic, kept mistress. She had used his fear of my madness to keep us both in a living hell for a decade. When Mike confronted her with the digital logs in the living room of the Sinclair estate, Isla didn't cry. She didn't grab her head or scream about her PTSD. She simply looked at him with a cold, mocking sneer. So what if I did? She had said, her voice sharp and arrogant. You think you're a victim, Gav? You loved the drama. You loved having a wife who was crazy for you and a mistress who was dying for you. You built this whole mess yourself. I just gave you the script to keep it running. She had packed her bags that night, taking $3 million from their joint account and leaving the key to the sanctuary on the kitchen counter. Mike was left entirely alone in the massive, dark mansion. He sat on the floor of the bedroom, staring at the shattered glass of our portrait. He realized with a sudden suffocating horror that the Vivian of 10 years later had never been the monster. The monster had been the girl he had built a sanctuary for. And the wife who had set herself on fire to keep him warm was gone, far beyond his reach. A year after the divorce, my first solo art exhibition, The Light of Vaucluse, opened at the Sydney Contemporary Art Gallery. The room was beautiful, filled with massive, vibrant canvases painted in rich, warm strokes of gold, azure, and crimson. The gallery was packed with critics, collectors, and socialites, all chatting over glasses of local champagne. I stood near the entrance, wearing a simple, elegant backless gown of white silk. My hair was styled in soft waves, and my wrist, now carrying only a faint silver scar, was decorated with a delicate gold bracelet my father had given me. I looked at my paintings, feeling a deep, quiet pride. I was no longer the girl who tore canvases down the middle. I was the artist who made them whole. And then, the chatter near the entrance suddenly hushed. I turned. Standing in the doorway of the gallery, looking entirely out of place among the elegant, sun-drenched crowd, was Mike. He looked unrecognizable. He had lost 20 pounds, his tailored black suit hung loosely on his frame, and his eyes were hollow, dark, and filled with a wild, broken despair. His hair was messy, and he was clutching a single, crumpled envelope in his hand. He stared at me, his chest heaving as if he had run a marathon just to reach this room. Vivian, he whispered. The crowd began to whisper behind their hands, but Mike didn't care. He marched through the room, his eyes entirely locked on my face, and stopped right in front of my canvas of the Vaucluse cliffs. I found you, he said, his voice cracking with a ragged, pathetic hope. Vivian, I've been looking for you for months. I set my champagne glass down on a passing waiter's tray. I didn't feel my heart rate spike. I didn't feel the suffocating terror of my past. I simply looked at him with a calm, polite curiosity. Mike, I said, my voice cool and even. This is a private exhibition. How did you get in? I bought a ticket, Vivian. I bought all of them, he said, his hands shaking as he held out the crumpled envelope. The gallery, the paintings. I'll buy everything. Just talk to me, please. The paintings are already sold, Mike, I said softly. The exhibition is fully booked. I don't care about the paintings, he cried out, his voice drawing sharp looks from the security guards near the wall. He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. I know the truth now, Vivian. I know about the phone call. Isla. She faked it. She used a voice deepfake. She lied to me for 10 years to keep us apart, to keep your father's money in the company. He reached out, his hand trembling as he tried to grab my wrist. I quietly took a step back, letting his fingers grasp empty air. His face fell, a shadow of profound, agonizing rejection crossing his features. I know, I said. He froze. You knew? I suspected it, I said, my voice carrying the quiet, logical calm of a woman who had spent a year in therapy. Isla was never clever enough to keep a secret like that forever. But it doesn't matter, Mike. The call wasn't why we broke up. What do you mean? He stammered, tears finally spilling down his hollow cheeks. We broke up because of the call. Because I was terrified of you. If I had known she faked it, I never would have signed those papers. I never would have built that house for her. Vivian, I loved you. I've always loved you. No, Mike, I said, looking straight into his eyes. You didn't love me. You loved the control. You loved having a wife who was so terrified of losing you that she would climb onto a roof ledge just to hear you say you were sorry. You used my mother's tragedy to keep me in a state of permanent madness so you could play the long-suffering savior. I looked at the canvas behind him, a painting of a single, brilliant sun rising over the ocean. I didn't lie to you in Isla's room to save your life, Mike, I said softly. I lied to save my own. I wanted you to sign those papers because I was tired of being the madwoman in your story. Vivian, please, he sobbed, falling to his knees on the polished marble floor of the gallery. He didn't care about his dignity, his corporate status, or the dozens of cameras that were suddenly clicking from the social media reporters in the crowd. I have nothing left. The company is in bankruptcy. Isla is gone. The house. I burned it down, Vivian. I set a fire and burned her sanctuary to the ground just like the call said. I did it for you. Please come back to Seattle with me. I looked down at the man kneeling at my feet, the man who had occupied my entire universe for a decade. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no hatred, not even a trace of the old burning resentment. Just a quiet, peaceful pity. The Vivian who would have burned for you is gone, Mike, I said softly. She died in Seattle, and I have no desire to bring her back. I looked at my father, who was standing near the gallery office, flanked by 3 tall, professional security guards. I gave him a small nod. The guards immediately stepped forward, their faces stern and unyielding as they gripped Mike's arms and pulled him up from the floor. Mr. Sinclair, the lead guard said, his voice carrying a firm, polite authority. You are disrupting the exhibition. Please leave the gallery. Immediately. Vivian, no. Mike screamed as they began to drag him toward the exit. He thrashed against their grip, his polished shoes scuffing the floor, his eyes wild with the exact, frantic madness he had spent 10 years accusing me of. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Torture me. Destroy me. Do whatever you want. Just don't. Leave me alone. Vivian. His screams echoed through the grand gallery, growing fainter and fainter until the heavy glass doors finally swung shut, cutting off his voice entirely. The room fell quiet once more. The guests slowly returned to their conversations, the champagne glasses clinked, and the soft, elegant jazz music resumed from the speakers. I stood in front of my canvas, took a deep, clean breath, and felt the warm Australian sun streaming through the skylight above us. My phone vibrated in my clutch. I pulled it out, but there were no frantic messages, no unknown numbers from the future, and no missed calls from a ghost. It was just a text from my father. The table at the restaurant is booked for 8. Let's celebrate your new beginning, Vivian. I smiled, slipped the phone away, and walked back into the light of my own life.